My name is Shirley Scott, and I am 71 years old, and the day my son-in-law told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner, I discovered exactly how much my family valued me as a person versus what I could provide them financially. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving when everything unraveled and I should have seen it coming, but sometimes when you love people you choose to believe the best about them, even when the evidence keeps mounting that maybe you shouldn't. I was standing in my kitchen in Cedar Falls preparing the cranberry sauce recipe that had been in our family for 3 generations, when my daughter Rebecca called. She sounded different right from the start, not her usual cheerful self, but strained like she was reading from a script she didn't want to deliver. She started with small talk about the weather and her youngest son's soccer practice, but I could hear something underneath her words that made my stomach tighten. After 43 years of being her mother, I knew when she was building up to something difficult, and I set down my wooden spoon and gave her my full attention. That's when she dropped the first hint that this year would be different. Rebecca told me that Derek, her husband, had been thinking about the holidays and how crowded the house gets with all the extended family, and maybe it would be better if we kept things smaller this year. She said it so carefully, like she was walking through a minefield, and I felt my chest tighten because I knew what smaller meant when it came to Derek's version of family planning. It meant his parents and his sister would be there along with his college buddies who always seemed to materialize for free meals, but somehow my presence was the problem. I asked her directly what she meant by smaller, and there was this long pause where I could hear her breathing and probably looking at Derek for guidance. When she finally spoke again, her voice was even more strained, and she said that Derek thought it might be too stressful for me to travel all the way from Cedar Falls to their house in Minneapolis, especially with my arthritis acting up. The concern in her voice sounded so practiced, so rehearsed, that I knew she'd been coached on exactly what to say. The thing was, my arthritis wasn't acting up any more than usual, and the drive to Minneapolis was only 2 hours, something I'd been doing without complaint for the past 8 years, since they moved into that big house in the suburbs. I told Rebecca that I felt fine and that I was looking forward to seeing everyone, especially the grandchildren who I hadn't spent time with since early October. She made a small sound like she was trying to think of another excuse, and that's when I knew for certain that Derek was behind this conversation. I decided to push a little harder because I needed to understand what was really happening, so I asked Rebecca if Derek had said something specific about not wanting me there. The silence that followed was so long I thought the call had dropped, but then she sighed and I could practically see her shoulders slumping. She told me that Derek felt like the holidays had become too chaotic and that maybe we could do something quieter after New Year's, just the immediate family. What she meant was that Derek's family was welcome for the holidays, but I wasn't, and she was too afraid to stand up to him to tell him that was unacceptable. I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I realized that my own daughter was choosing her husband's convenience over her relationship with me, and I wondered how many other times she'd done this without me knowing. I kept my voice steady when I asked her who exactly would be there for Christmas dinner, and she rattled off the usual list: Derek's parents flying in from Phoenix, his sister and her 3 kids driving up from Iowa, and his college roommate Mark, who apparently always spent Christmas with them because his own family lived on the East Coast. So Derek's college friend was more welcome in their home during the holidays than the woman who had raised Rebecca, but somehow I was the one who made things too crowded. The irony wasn't lost on me that Derek had no problem with chaos when it came from his side of the family, or his friends, but my presence was somehow disrupted. I thought about all the Christmas mornings I'd spent with Rebecca when she was growing up, how we'd wake up early to start the turkey and spend the day cooking together while Christmas music played in the background. Those memories felt hollow now, knowing that she was willing to exclude me to keep her husband happy. I told Rebecca I was disappointed and confused and asked if there was something I'd done to upset Derek, but she quickly said no, that it wasn't about anything specific, just that he wanted a more relaxed holiday. The way she said it made it clear that this decision wasn't up for discussion, that Derek had already made up his mind and she was just the messenger delivering news she knew would hurt me. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the half-finished cranberry sauce and feeling like I'd been kicked in the chest. I thought about calling Rebecca back to tell her exactly what I thought about Derek's decision, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She'd made her choice and it wasn't me. The next few days passed in a blur of hurt and confusion, as I tried to make sense of what had happened. I canceled my plans to buy Christmas gifts for Derek's family, and I stopped preparing the side dishes I always brought to their dinner. Instead, I sat in my living room looking at the photo albums full of pictures from previous holidays, wondering if Rebecca had been pretending to enjoy my company all those years, or if Derek had slowly poisoned her against me. I called my sister Margaret, who lived in Phoenix, and told her what happened, and she was furious on my behalf. She said she'd never liked Derek from the moment Rebecca brought him home 7 years ago, that there was something calculating about the way he looked at people, like he was always figuring out what they could do for him. I dismissed her concerns at the time because Rebecca seemed happy, but now I wondered if Margaret had seen something I'd missed. Margaret suggested I come to Phoenix for the holidays and spend Christmas with her and her family, but the idea of running away felt wrong, like I was letting Derek win. And I thanked her for the invitation, but told her I needed to stay in Cedar Falls and figure out what I was going to do next. That's when she said something that stuck with me. She said that people like Derek only respect power, and that maybe it was time I reminded him that I had some. On Friday afternoon, exactly 3 days after Rebecca's phone call, Derek called me himself, and his voice was so friendly and warm that if I hadn't known better, I would have thought he was calling to invite me for Christmas after all. Instead, he launched into a story about how he and Rebecca were looking at refinancing their mortgage to take advantage of lower interest rates, and how the bank required additional collateral to approve the loan amount they want. He explained that they were trying to access the equity in their home to renovate the kitchen and add a bathroom upstairs for the kids, and that the bank wanted a cosigner with excellent credit and significant assets. He said this so casually, like it was just a minor detail, but I knew immediately where this conversation was heading, and I felt my jaw clench. Derek went on to say that Rebecca had mentioned my financial stability and strong credit score, and that they were hoping I might consider helping them out by co-signing the loan. He made it sound like they were doing me a favor by asking like I should be honored that they trusted me enough to include me in their financial planning. The audacity of it took my breath away. Here was the same man who had decided I wasn't welcome in his home for Christmas, calling to ask me to risk my financial security for his renovation project. He wanted me to guarantee a loan that would put my savings and my house at risk if they defaulted, but I wasn't good enough to share a holiday meal with his family. The contradiction was so stark it would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. I let him finish his pitch without interrupting, and when he finally stopped talking, I asked him if Rebecca knew he was calling me about this. He said of course she knew, and that they'd discussed it thoroughly and decided together that I was the best option for a cosign. I wondered if they'd discussed it before or after they decided to exclude me from Christmas, but I didn't ask. Instead, I told Derek I'd need some time to think about it and review the financial documents before making any decision. He sounded pleased and said he'd email me all the paperwork that afternoon, and that there was no rush, but they were hoping to close on the loan before the end of the year. I told him I understood and hung up, feeling like I'd just been slapped across the face. The email arrived 2 hours later with a dozen attachments, including loan applications, credit checks, and renovation estimates. The total amount they wanted to borrow was staggering, nearly $200,000 that would more than double their existing mortgage payment. As a cosigner, I would be legally responsible for the entire debt if they couldn't pay, and given Derek's history of changing jobs every few years, I wasn't confident in their ability to handle the increased financial burden. I spent the weekend reading through every document and researching the contractor they planned to hire for the renovation. What I found made my blood run cold. The contractor had several complaints filed against him with the Better Business Bureau and 2 recent lawsuits from customers who claimed he'd taken their money and abandoned projects halfway through. Derek and Rebecca either hadn't done their research, or they were so eager to start the renovations that they were willing to ignore the red flags. By Sunday evening I had made my decision, but I wanted to talk to Rebecca first, to see if she understood what they were asking of me. I called her Monday morning while Derek was at work and asked if we could have an honest conversation about the loan and about Christmas. She sounded nervous when she agreed, like she knew this conversation wouldn't go the way she wanted. I started by asking her if she really understood what it meant for me to co-sign such a large loan, and she said yes, that Derek had explained everything and that they would never put me at risk. I told her about the contractor's history and the complaints against him and suggested they might want to get additional references before moving forward. She dismissed my concerns and said Derek had already vetted the contractor thoroughly and that I was worrying unnecessarily. Then I asked her the question that had been burning in my mind since Friday: why Derek thought it was appropriate to ask me to guarantee their debt when I wasn't even welcome in their home for the holiday. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the clock ticking in my kitchen, and I knew I'd hit the nerve I was aiming for. Rebecca started to stammer that the two things weren't related, that the loan was business and Christmas was personal, but even she didn't sound convinced by her own words. I told her that from my perspective it looked like Derek wanted my money but not my company, and that I was having trouble understanding how those two things could be separated. She tried to explain that Derek's feelings about the holidays were complicated and that he'd grown up with a lot of family drama around Christmas and preferred to keep things simple. I pointed out that his preference for simplicity seemed to include his entire extended family plus his college friends, but somehow excluded me, and asked her if she could see how that might be hurtful. Rebecca started crying then and said she was caught in the middle and didn't know what to do, that Derek got stressed about money and family obligations and that she was trying to keep everyone happy. I felt my heart break a little hearing my daughter reduced to tears by a man who seemed to care more about his own comfort than her emotional well-being. I told Rebecca that I loved her and would always be there for her, but that I couldn't pretend Derek's behavior was acceptable just to avoid conflict. I said I needed more time to think about both the loan and the holiday situation, and that I'd call her back in a few days. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table feeling like I was at a crossroads that would determine the rest of my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren. That night I couldn't sleep, so I got up and made myself a cup of tea and sat in my living room thinking about my late husband Robert and what he would have done in this situation. Robert had never liked it when people tried to take advantage of our generosity, and he'd always said that respect and financial support should go hand in hand. He would have been furious about Derek's behavior and probably would have driven to Minneapolis that night to have a conversation with him. By Wednesday I had formulated a plan that felt both fair and protective of my own interests. I called my attorney James Morrison, who had handled Robert's estate, and asked if he could meet with me to discuss a financial matter. He agreed to see me Thursday afternoon, and I spent the rest of the week preparing for what I knew would be a difficult conversation with Rebecca and Derek. Thursday morning Derek called again, sounding much more urgent than he had the previous week. He said the bank was pushing for a decision on the cosigner and that they needed to know by Monday if I was willing to sign the paperwork. He also mentioned that interest rates were starting to climb again and that waiting much longer could cost them thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. I told Derek I'd been reviewing the documents and had some concerns about the contractor they'd chosen, and asked if they'd be willing to get a second opinion before moving forward. He sounded irritated and said they'd already signed a contract with the contractor and that changing course now would cost them their deposit. I suggested that losing a deposit might be better than being stuck with substandard work, but he brushed off my concerns and said I was overthinking things. Then Derek did something that showed me exactly who he really was. He shifted his tone completely and became almost threatening. He said that Rebecca was really counting on this renovation and that she'd been so excited about finally having the kitchen she'd always wanted. He said it would break her heart if the project fell through because I was being overly cautious, and that he hoped I cared enough about my daughter's happiness to help make her dreams come true. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost insulting. He was trying to make me feel guilty for being responsible with my finances and suggesting that my love for Rebecca should override my common sense. I told Derek I would give him my answer by Monday as he'd requested, and hung up before he could apply any more pressure. That afternoon I met with James Morrison in his office overlooking the Cedar River and explained the situation in detail. James listened without interrupting, and when I finished he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. He said that in 40 years of practicing law he'd seen this exact scenario dozens of times: family members using emotional leverage to pressure relatives into risky financial decisions. James pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes as he explained the potential consequences of co-signing such a large loan. If Derek and Rebecca defaulted, I could lose my house, my savings, and any other assets the bank could claim to satisfy the debt. He also pointed out that as a co-signer I would have no control over how the money was spent or whether the project was completed satisfactorily. Then James asked me the question that crystallized everything. He asked if I really believed Derek would treat me with respect and consideration if I gave him access to my financial resources when he wouldn't even allow me to join the family for Christmas dinner. The answer was so obvious I almost laughed. Derek had already shown me exactly how much he valued me as a person, and it wasn't enough to risk my financial security. I told James I wanted to draft a response to Derek and Rebecca that would protect my interests while making it clear that I understood exactly what was happening. James suggested we create a formal letter that outlined my position and left no room for misinterpretation. We spent the next hour crafting language that was both professional and unmistakably firm. The letter stated that I would be willing to consider co-signing their loan under specific conditions. First, they would need to hire a different contractor with verifiable references and a clean record with the Better Business Bureau. Second, they would need to provide me with detailed monthly financial statements showing their income, expenses, and loan payments. Third, they would need to take out life insurance policies, naming me as beneficiary to cover the loan amount in case of their deaths. The fourth condition was the one I knew would reveal Derek's true priorities. I required that any co-signer arrangement include a formal agreement that I would be treated as a valued family member with all the respect and inclusion that entailed, including being welcome at all family gatherings and holidays without exception. I wanted it documented that my financial support came with the expectation of being treated like family, not just a bank. James read the letter back to me and asked if I was sure I wanted to include the fourth condition because it would likely cause significant conflict. I told him that was exactly the point. I wanted Derek to understand that he couldn't have my money without my presence, and that respect wasn't negotiable. If he truly valued me enough to ask for my financial backing, then he should value me enough to include me in his family. We mailed the letter Friday afternoon, and I spent the weekend feeling lighter than I had since this whole situation started. I knew Derek would be furious and that Rebecca would probably be caught in the middle again. But I also knew I was finally standing up for myself in a way that Robert would have been proud of. Monday morning my phone rang at 8:30 and I could hear Derek's anger before he even spoke. He said my conditions were ridiculous and insulting and that I was trying to control their lives with my money. He accused me of being manipulative and said that family relationships shouldn't be transactional like business deals. I almost laughed at the irony of Derek accusing me of being transactional when he was the one who wanted to exclude me from family gatherings while asking for my financial guarantee. I told him that respect and consideration were indeed part of family relationships, and that I was simply asking to be treated the way I deserved to be treated. Derek's voice got louder as he said that my demands were unreasonable and that I was putting Rebecca in an impossible position. He said that if I really loved my daughter, I would help her get the kitchen renovation she wanted without trying to dictate how they ran their household. The manipulation was even more blatant this time, and I realized he genuinely believed I would cave under pressure. Instead, I told Derek that my terms were non-negotiable and that if he found them unacceptable, he was free to seek financing elsewhere. I reminded him that I hadn't asked to be involved in their loan process, that he had come to me asking for help and that help came with expectation. I said that if he wanted to be treated like an adult, he needed to act like one and show some respect for the people he was asking favors from. The conversation ended with Derek hanging up on me, and I sat there holding the phone, feeling proud of myself for not backing down. Within an hour, Rebecca called sobbing and begging me to reconsider. She said Derek was furious and that they'd been fighting all morning about the loan and about Christmas. She pleaded with me to just sign the papers and forget about the other conditions because she couldn't handle the conflict anymore. I felt my heart break listening to my daughter cry, but I also felt angry that she was more upset about Derek's reaction than about the way he'd been treating me. I told Rebecca that I loved her, but that I wouldn't enable Derek's disrespectful behavior by giving him what he wanted while accepting crumbs in return. I said that if their marriage was solid enough to handle a large financial commitment together, it should be solid enough for Derek to treat her mother with basic courtesy. Rebecca said I didn't understand the pressure Derek was under at work and that he'd been stressed about money for months. She said the renovation was important to him because he wanted to provide a nice home for their family and that my conditions were making him feel like his authority as head of household was being challenged. I told Rebecca that Derek's stress didn't excuse his behavior and that being head of household didn't mean he got to exclude family members from holidays while demanding their financial support. I said that if he was truly concerned about providing for his family, he might consider being more respectful to the people he was asking for help. The conversation ended with Rebecca saying she needed time to think and that she'd call me back later. She didn't call that day or the next, and by Wednesday I was starting to worry that I'd pushed too hard and damaged our relationship permanently. But then I remembered Robert's advice about standing up for yourself even when it was difficult, and I knew I'd done the right thing. Thursday afternoon, I was surprised to get a call from Derek's mother, Patricia, who I'd met several times at family gatherings over the years. She sounded uncomfortable but determined as she told me that Derek had called her about the loan situation and asked for her advice. Patricia said she'd told Derek that his behavior toward me was unacceptable and that he needed to apologize and change his approach. Patricia went on to say that she'd raised Derek to be respectful to his elders and that she was embarrassed by the way he'd treated me. She said that in her family, financial support and family inclusion went together and that Derek's attempt to separate the two was both ungrateful and short-sighted. She apologized on Derek's behalf and said she hoped I wouldn't judge their entire family based on her son's poor judgment. I thanked Patricia for calling and told her I appreciated her perspective but that Derek needed to make his own decision about how he wanted to handle the situation. I said that I bore no ill will toward their family but that I couldn't accept being treated as less important than Derek's college friends when it came to holiday gatherings. Patricia sighed and said she'd had a similar conversation with Derek about his priorities and that she hoped he would come to his senses before he damaged his relationship with Rebecca's family permanently. She said that Derek's father was also upset about the situation and had threatened to skip Christmas dinner himself if Derek didn't invite me properly. Friday morning, Derek called again and his tone was completely different from the previous conversation. He sounded subdued, almost defeated, as he asked if we could start over and have a civil discussion about the loan and the holidays. I told him I was willing to listen but that my conditions hadn't changed. Derek said he'd been thinking about what I'd said and that maybe he'd been too focused on his own stress to consider how his actions affected other people. He admitted that excluding me from Christmas while asking for my financial help had been inappropriate and said he wanted to make things right. He asked if I would be willing to join them for Christmas dinner if he extended a proper invitation. I told Derek that a proper invitation would be appreciated but that I needed to see consistent, respectful behavior, not just a one-time gesture to get what he wanted. I said that if he was serious about treating me like family, then that needed to be an ongoing commitment, not just something that happened when he needed my signature on loan documents. Derek agreed to my terms about the contractor and the insurance policies, and said he understood that co-signing a loan was a serious commitment that required trust and respect from both parties. He said he would send me documentation from a different contractor with better references and that he would be more considerate about including me in family decisions going forward. I told Derek I would review the new contractor information and get back to him within a week. I also said that I expected a formal invitation to Christmas dinner, not just a grudging acknowledgement that I could come if I wanted to. He agreed and said he would call me over the weekend to discuss holiday plans properly. Saturday afternoon, Derek called with Rebecca on speakerphone and together they invited me to spend Christmas with their family. Derek apologized for his previous behavior and said he'd been stressed about finances and had taken it out on people who didn't deserve it. He said he valued my place in their family and wanted to make sure I felt welcome and appreciated. Rebecca sounded relieved as she talked about Christmas dinner plans and asked what dishes I'd like to contribute. For the first time in weeks, she sounded like my daughter again instead of Derek's nervous messenger. We spent 20 minutes discussing menu plans and gift ideas, and when we hung up, I felt like maybe there was hope for our relationship after all. The following week, Derek sent me documentation from a new contractor with excellent references and a detailed project timeline. He also provided proof of insurance and bank statements showing their current financial position. Everything looked much more professional and thorough than the original proposal, and I felt more confident about the project's chances of success. I called James Morrison to review the new documents, and he agreed that the revised proposal was much more reasonable, and that Derek seemed to be taking the process more seriously. James drafted a co-signer agreement that included all my conditions and protections for my financial interests. I signed the papers the following Friday, and Derek and Rebecca were able to close on their loan before Christmas. Christmas dinner turned out to be one of the best holidays I'd had in years. Derek made a point of introducing me to his family and friends as Rebecca's mother and an important part of their family. He asked for my advice about the renovation timeline and included me in conversations about the grandchildren's school activities and sports team. Rebecca seemed happier and more relaxed than she had in months. During dinner, Derek stood up and made a toast, thanking everyone for being part of their family and specifically acknowledging my support for their renovation project. He said that family meant being there for each other through good times and bad, and that he was grateful to have me as part of their extended family. It felt genuine, and I could see that Rebecca was proud of him for making the effort. After dinner, Derek and I had a private conversation where he admitted that he'd been jealous of my close relationship with Rebecca and had felt like I was criticizing his ability to provide for his family. He said that asking for the loan had made him feel vulnerable and that he'd lashed out defensively instead of approaching the situation maturely. He thanked me for standing firm on my principles and said it had forced him to examine his own behavior. I told Derek that I respected his desire to be a good provider for his family, but that respect and consideration were just as important as financial success. I said that I wanted to support their family in whatever way I could, but that support had to be mutual and based on genuine appreciation, not just financial convenience. The renovation project went smoothly with the new contractor, and Derek made a point of sending me regular updates and photos of the progress. He and Rebecca invited me to see the finished kitchen when it was completed, and Derek proudly showed me every detail of the work. Rebecca was thrilled with the results and thanked me repeatedly for making it possible. 6 months later, Derek called to tell me they were planning a housewarming party to show off the renovated kitchen and asked if I would help Rebecca plan the menu. He said he wanted to invite both sides of the family and make it a celebration of the home they'd built together. I was touched that he thought to include me in the planning and agreed to help with the preparation. At the housewarming party, Derek made another toast acknowledging my contribution to their home improvement project and thanking me for being such an important part of their family. He said that the kitchen renovation had taught him valuable lessons about respect and family relationships, and that he was grateful for my patience and guidance. Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself and insisting on being treated with respect was one of the best decisions I ever made. Derek learned that family relationships require mutual consideration and that financial support comes with emotional responsibilities. Rebecca learned that she didn't have to choose between her husband and her mother if she was willing to insist on reasonable behavior from both of us. The loan payments have been made on time every month, and Derek sends me quarterly financial updates as promised. More importantly, he's made a genuine effort to include me in family decisions and holiday plans. Last month, he called to ask my opinion about summer vacation plans for the grandchildren and to invite me to join them for a weekend at the lake. I've learned that sometimes people need clear boundaries and consequences to understand how their behavior affects others. Derek wasn't a bad person, he was just selfish and immature and needed to be held accountable for his actions. By refusing to enable his disrespectful behavior, I forced him to grow up and learn how to treat family members appropriately. Rebecca and I have a stronger relationship now than we've had in years because she no longer feels caught between Derek's demands and my expectations. Derek has learned to value my contributions to their family, both financial and emotional, and treats me with the respect I deserve. The grandchildren benefit from having their grandmother included in family activities and celebrations. Most importantly, I've learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean being confrontational or demanding. It means having clear expectations and being willing to enforce them consistently. Derek needed to understand that respect isn't optional in family relationships and that people who ask for favors should be prepared to give something back in return. The house renovation turned out beautifully, and Derek and Rebecca have created a warm, welcoming home for their family. Every time I visit and see the kitchen we made possible together, I'm reminded that sometimes the most important investments we make aren't financial, they're the investments we make in teaching people how to treat us with dignity and respect. The week leading up to Thanksgiving, felt like walking through quicksand where every step forward required enormous effort and I kept sinking deeper into a situation I couldn't have imagined just months earlier. Tuesday morning brought another phone call from Derek, but this time his voice carried an edge of desperation that I hadn't heard before. He started by asking if I'd had a chance to review the loan documents he'd emailed, and when I told him I was still going through them carefully, he made a sound like he was grinding his teeth. Derek launched into a detailed explanation about the timing of the loan approval and how the bank had given them a narrow window to secure a cosigner before the interest rates increased again. He said they'd already put down deposits on materials and booked the contractor for December, and that any delay could cost them thousands of dollars in penalties and rescheduling fees. The pressure in his voice was unmistakable, and I realized he'd been counting on me to sign immediately without asking difficult questions. I told Derek that $200,000 was a significant amount of money to guarantee and that I needed to be thorough in my review, especially since my retirement savings would be at risk if anything went wrong. He responded with a heavy sigh and said he understood my caution, but that he hoped I trusted him and Rebecca enough to know they would never put me in financial jeopardy. The way he said it made it sound like my concerns were an insult to their character rather than reasonable financial prudence. Then Derek shifted tactics and started talking about Rebecca's excitement about the kitchen renovation and how she'd been dreaming about having a proper space to cook for the family. He described in detail how cramped their current kitchen was, and how difficult it made hosting family gatherings, especially during the holiday. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was talking about hosting family gatherings while simultaneously excluding me from Christmas dinner, but I let him continue without interrupting. Derek went on to say that Rebecca had been looking at kitchen designs for months and had her heart set on specific appliances and fixtures that were currently on sale but wouldn't be available at those prices much longer. He painted a picture of Rebecca's disappointment if the project fell through and suggested that I was the only person who could make her renovation dreams come true. The emotional manipulation was so transparent it made my stomach turn. When Derek finished his pitch, I told him I needed to ask some direct questions about their financial situation and their long-term plans for managing the increased debt load. I asked about his job security and whether he expected his income to remain stable or increase over the next few years. There was a pause before he answered, and when he did speak, his voice was more guarded, like he was choosing his words carefully. Derek admitted that his current position was solid, but that his industry had been experiencing some volatility lately and there were rumors about potential layoffs at competing firms. He quickly added that his company seemed stable and that he'd been getting positive performance reviews, but the uncertainty in his voice told a different story. I asked if he and Rebecca had discussed what would happen to the loan payments if he lost his job, and he said they had some savings set aside for emergency. I pressed him for specifics about their emergency fund and their monthly expenses, and Derek became increasingly uncomfortable as he realized I wasn't going to accept vague reassurances. He told me they had about 3 months' worth of expenses saved and that Rebecca's part-time job at the dental office provided some additional income, though not enough to cover the mortgage and the new loan payments on its own. The more questions I asked, the clearer it became that Derek and Rebecca hadn't fully thought through the financial implications of taking on such a large debt. They seemed to be operating on the assumption that everything would continue exactly as it was now without considering the possibility of job loss, illness, or other unexpected expenses. As someone who had lived through multiple economic downturns and seen friends lose their homes to foreclosure, I knew how quickly financial situations could change. I told Derek I needed more time to review everything and that I wanted to speak with Rebecca directly about their budget and their backup plan. He sounded frustrated when he said that Rebecca was just as committed to the project as he was and that talking to her wouldn't change anything about their financial situation. I replied that nevertheless I wanted to hear her perspective before making such a significant commitment. After hanging up, I spent the rest of the morning going through the loan documents line by line and researching the contractor Derek had chosen. What I found made me increasingly uncomfortable. The contractor's business license was only 2 years old, and while he had some positive reviews, there were also several complaints about projects running over budget and behind schedule. One reviewer mentioned that the contractor had demanded additional payments midway through their project, claiming unexpected complications that weren't covered in the original estimate. I called Rebecca Wednesday evening when I knew Derek would be at his weekly poker game with his work colleague. She sounded tired when she answered, and I could hear the television in the background along with the children's voices as they played in another room. I asked if she had a few minutes to talk privately about the loan, and she said she could step outside onto their back deck where it would be quieter. Rebecca's voice immediately became more animated when I brought up the kitchen renovation, and she launched into an enthusiastic description of the plans they'd developed with the contractor. She talked about installing a large island with seating for the children to do homework while she cooked and replacing the outdated appliances with energy-efficient models that would save money on their utility bill. Her excitement was genuine and infectious, and I could hear how much this project meant to her. But when I started asking about the financial details, Rebecca's enthusiasm dimmed, and she admitted that she'd left most of the budget planning to Derek because numbers made her anxious. She said Derek had assured her that they could afford the monthly payments and that the renovation would increase their home's value enough to justify the expense. When I asked if she'd seen their actual budget breakdown, she said Derek had showed her some calculations but that she hadn't studied them carefully. I gently suggested that as Derek's partner in this major financial decision, she should understand exactly what they were committing to and how the loan payments would affect their monthly budget. Rebecca sounded defensive when she said that Derek was good with money and that she trusted his judgment about what they could afford. I pointed out that trust was important, but that understanding was equally crucial, especially when such large amounts were involved. Rebecca grew quiet when I asked about their emergency savings and their plans for handling unexpected expenses. She admitted that they didn't have much set aside beyond a small checking account they used for irregular expenses like car repairs and medical bills. When I asked what would happen if Derek lost his job, she said they'd figure something out and that his company seemed stable enough that layoffs weren't a concern. I tried to explain gently that economic conditions could change quickly and that responsible financial planning meant preparing for multiple scenarios, not just the best-case outcome. Rebecca listened politely, but I could tell she thought I was being overly pessimistic and that my concerns were based on outdated thinking about job security and debt management. The conversation took a more serious turn when I asked Rebecca directly whether she was comfortable asking me to guarantee such a large loan when they didn't have solid backup plans in place. She was quiet for a long moment before saying that Derek had told her I would probably want to help since I cared about their family and wanted to see them succeed. The way she said it made it clear that Derek had coached her on how to frame the request. I told Rebecca that of course I wanted to help their family succeed, but that helping sometimes meant asking hard questions and making sure people were making wise decisions. I said that guaranteeing a loan I wasn't confident they could repay wouldn't actually be helping anyone and could potentially damage our family relationships if financial problems arose later. Rebecca started crying then and said she felt like everyone was trying to talk them out of something that would make their family happier and more comfortable. She said Derek had been working so hard to provide for them and that the kitchen renovation felt like finally being able to enjoy some of the success he'd achieved. Through her tears, she asked why I couldn't just trust that they knew what was best for their own family. My heart ached hearing my daughter cry, but I also felt frustrated that she seemed to view my financial caution as a lack of support for their happiness. I told Rebecca that I loved her and wanted nothing more than for her family to thrive, but that love meant being honest about risks and concerns, not just agreeing to everything they asked for. I said that protecting their long-term financial stability was more important than making their short-term dreams come true immediately. Rebecca said she needed to go check on the children and ended the call abruptly, leaving me sitting in my living room feeling like I'd somehow become the villain in their story simply by asking reasonable questions about a major financial commitment. I wondered if Derek had deliberately kept Rebecca uninformed about their true financial situation so she couldn't answer my questions, or if she genuinely believed that optimism and good intentions were sufficient to guarantee their ability to repay such a large loan. Thursday morning brought an unexpected call from my neighbor Helen Kowalski, who had lived on my street for nearly 30 years and whose opinion I valued highly. Helen had raised 4 children as a single mother after her husband died young and had managed to put all of them through college while maintaining her home and building a modest retirement fund. She understood better than most people what it meant to make difficult financial decisions under pressure. Helen said she'd been thinking about our conversation the previous week when I'd mentioned Derek's loan request and that something had been bothering her about the situation. She asked if I'd mind her sharing some observations as someone who had watched my family from a distance over the years. I told her I'd welcome any insights she could offer since I was struggling to know how to handle the situation. Helen said that in her experience, when family members asked for large financial favors while simultaneously creating distance in the relationship, it usually meant they were trying to separate the emotional connection from the financial obligation. She pointed out that Derek's decision to exclude me from Christmas while asking me to co-sign their loan followed this exact pattern and suggested that he was trying to minimize his sense of obligation to me while maximizing his access to my resource. Helen went on to say that she'd observed Derek's behavior at neighborhood gatherings over the years and that he seemed to treat people differently based on what they could do for him. She mentioned that he was always friendly and attentive to the neighbors who had connections in his industry or who could help with home improvement projects, but was much less engaged with people who couldn't offer him obvious benefits. I asked Helen if she thought I was being too cautious about the loan, and she laughed and said that caution was exactly what the situation called for. She told me about her own experience with family members who had asked for financial help over the years and how the relationships that survived were the ones where everyone was honest about expectations and limitations from the beginning. She said that family members who resented questions about financial responsibility usually weren't good risks for loans. Helen suggested that I consider whether Derek's attitude toward me would improve or worsen if I gave him access to my financial resources without requiring him to treat me with consistent respect and consideration. She pointed out that people who felt entitled to financial help without offering emotional reciprocity rarely became more grateful or considerate after getting what they wanted. Friday afternoon, Rebecca called again and her voice sounded strained, like she'd been crying recently. She said that Derek was getting frustrated with the delays in finalizing the loan and that the contractor was pressuring them to confirm the December start date or risk losing their spot in his schedule. She asked if there was anything specific I needed from them to move forward with the co-signing process. I told Rebecca that I'd been researching the contractor Derek had chosen and that I had some concerns about his track record and business practice. I mentioned the complaints I'd found online and suggested that they might want to get references from recent customers before committing to such a large project. Rebecca sounded surprised and said that Derek had told her the contractor came highly recommended and had excellent reviews. When I described the specific complaints I'd found, Rebecca grew quiet and said she'd have to discuss them with Derek. I could tell she was caught off guard by the information and that Derek hadn't shared these details with her during their planning process. I suggested that they take some time to research other contractors and get multiple bids before moving forward with such a significant investment. Rebecca said they'd already signed a contract with the current contractor and paid a substantial deposit, and that backing out now would cost them money they couldn't afford to lose. I pointed out that losing a deposit would be much less expensive than being stuck with poor workmanship or cost overruns that could double the price of the project. I urged her to read the contractor's reviews herself and talk to some of his previous customers before proceeding. The conversation ended with Rebecca saying she needed to discuss everything with Derek and that they'd call me back over the weekend. I could hear the stress in her voice, and I knew that my questions and concerns were creating tension in their marriage. But I also knew that failing to raise these issues could lead to much bigger problems later. Saturday morning, Derek called and his tone was completely different from our previous conversations. He sounded angry and defensive as he accused me of trying to sabotage their renovation project by spreading rumors about their contract. He said he'd done his own research and was satisfied with the contractor's qualifications and that my concerns were based on isolated complaints from customers who probably had unrealistic expectations. I told Derek that I wasn't trying to sabotage anything, but that I had a responsibility to protect my own financial interests when co-signing such a large loan. I said that if he was confident in the contractor's abilities, then he should be willing to get additional references and possibly a second opinion on the project scope and budget. Derek responded that getting new bids would delay the project and cost them their preferred start date. Derek then accused me of moving the goalposts and adding new requirements after initially agreeing to consider co-signing the loan. He said I was being manipulative and using my financial leverage to control their personal decisions about their home renovation. The accusation stung because it was exactly the opposite of what I was trying to do.
but I could see how my questions might feel intrusive to someone who wasn't used to being held accountable for major financial decisions. I reminded Derek that I'd never agreed to anything beyond reviewing their loan application and that asking questions about a $200,000 commitment was not only reasonable but necessary. I said that if he felt my due diligence process was too invasive, he was free to seek financing from other sources or wait until he could qualify for the loan without a cosign. Derek's voice got louder as he said that my attitude was putting Rebecca in an impossible position and causing unnecessary stress in their marriage. He accused me of caring more about money than about my daughter's happiness and said that my refusal to trust their judgment was damaging our family relationship. The irony of him talking about family relationships while excluding me from Christmas wasn't lost on me, but I decided not to point it out. Instead, I told Derek that trust worked both ways and that his unwillingness to answer reasonable questions about their financial planning didn't inspire confidence in their ability to handle such a large debt responsibly.
I said that if he wanted my trust and support, he needed to demonstrate that he was approaching this decision with appropriate seriousness and preparation. The call ended with Derek hanging up on me, and I sat there feeling like I'd been transported into someone else's life where asking prudent questions about major financial commitments was considered hostile and unreasonable. I wondered if Derek had expected me to simply sign the papers without reading them, or if he was genuinely surprised that someone might want to understand the risks before guaranteeing such a large loan. Sunday evening, Rebecca called back and she sounded exhausted, like she'd been mediating between Derek and me all weekend. She said that Derek felt like I was questioning his competence and integrity, and that my demands for additional information were insulting to him as the head of their household. She asked if there was any way we could find a compromise that would allow the loan process to move forward without so much conflict. I told Rebecca that I wasn't trying to insult anyone, but that co-signing a loan meant I would be legally responsible for the debt if they couldn't pay, and that I needed to be comfortable with that level of risk. I said that if Derek interpreted reasonable due diligence as a personal attack, then perhaps he wasn't ready for the kind of financial partnership that co-signing represented. Rebecca started crying again and said she felt like she was losing her mother and her marriage at the same time over a kitchen renovation that was supposed to make their family happier. She said Derek had been short-tempered with her and the children all weekend, and that she was starting to wonder if the project was worth all the stress and conflict it was causing. I felt terrible hearing my daughter in such distress, but I also knew that backing down now would only teach Derek that he could pressure me into making decisions I wasn't comfortable with. I told Rebecca that I loved her more than anything and that my concerns about the loan had nothing to do with my feelings for her and everything to do with protecting both of our families from potential financial disaster. Rebecca asked what it would take for me to feel comfortable co-signing the loan, and I told her honestly that I needed to see evidence that they had thoroughly researched their contractor and developed realistic backup plans for handling the debt if Derek's income was interrupted. I also said that I needed Derek to treat me with the respect and consideration that should be expected when asking someone for such a significant favor. The conversation ended with Rebecca promising to talk to Derek about addressing my concerns and finding a way to move forward that everyone could live. I could hear in her voice that she was genuinely trying to bridge the gap between Derek's expectations and my requirements, but I also sensed that she was beginning to understand why I was being so careful about protecting myself. Monday morning brought a surprise visitor when Derek's father, Robert Martinez, appeared at my front door carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing an expression that suggested he had something important to discuss. Robert was a retired electrician who had worked his way up from apprentice to contractor over a 40-year career, and he understood better than most people what it meant to take financial risks and live with the consequences. Robert asked if he could come in and talk to me about the situation between Derek and me because he felt like things were getting out of hand and someone needed to inject some common sense into the discussion. I invited him into my kitchen and poured coffee for both of us while he gathered his thoughts about what he wanted to say. Robert started by apologizing for Derek's behavior and saying that he'd raised his son to be more respectful and considerate than he'd been showing lately. He said that Derek's mother, Patricia, was also upset about the way Derek had been treating me and that they'd both tried to talk to him about adjusting his approach, but that Derek seemed to think everyone was ganging up on him unfairly. Robert went on to say that he'd looked at Derek and Rebecca's financial situation himself and that he had serious concerns about their ability to handle the increased debt load, especially given the instability in Derek's industry. He said that Derek seemed to be operating on the assumption that his income would continue to grow steadily without considering the possibility of setbacks or unexpected expenses. Robert told me that he'd offered to help Derek and Rebecca with a smaller loan for a more modest kitchen upgrade, but that Derek had rejected the suggestion and insisted that they needed the full renovation or nothing. Robert said that Derek's all-or-nothing attitude was typical of his approach to major decisions and that it often led to unnecessary stress and conflict. I asked Robert what he thought I should do about the co-signing request, and he said that in his opinion I was being appropriately cautious and that Derek needed to understand that borrowing money came with obligations beyond just making monthly payments. He said that when someone asks for a financial favor, they need to be prepared to accept guidance and oversight from the person who's taking the risk. Robert suggested that Derek might be more receptive to feedback from someone outside the immediate family and offered to talk to him about developing a more realistic approach to the renovation project. He said that Derek respected his opinion about construction and financial matters and that he might be able to help Derek understand why my concerns were legitimate and important. I thanked Robert for his offer and told him I'd appreciate any help he could provide in getting Derek to approach the situation more maturely. I said that I wanted to support Derek and Rebecca's goals, but that I needed to feel confident they were making responsible decisions that wouldn't jeopardize anyone's financial security. Robert spent another hour discussing the renovation project in detail and sharing his own experiences with contractors and home improvement loans. He confirmed many of my concerns about the contractor Derek had chosen and suggested several alternative contractors with better reputations and more established track records. He also offered to review any new bids they received and help them negotiate fair contracts. Tuesday afternoon, Derek called and his tone was noticeably different, more subdued and thoughtful than in our previous conversation. He said that his father had talked to him about the loan situation and helped him understand why I might have legitimate concerns about the project and the contractor they'd chosen. He admitted that he'd been so focused on getting the renovation started that he hadn't given proper consideration to the risks and responsibilities involved. Derek apologized for his behavior during our previous conversations and said that he realized he'd been treating my questions as personal attacks when they were actually reasonable requests for information. He said that he'd never been involved in such a large financial transaction before and that he hadn't fully understood what co-signing meant from my perspective. Derek went on to say that he and Rebecca had decided to get additional bids from other contractors and to take more time to research their options before moving forward with the project. He said that his father had given them names of several reputable contractors who might be able to provide better value and more reliable service than their original choice. I told Derek that I appreciated his apology and his willingness to reconsider their approach to the renovation. I said that taking time to make informed decisions was always better than rushing into major commitments, especially when so much money was involved. I offered to review any new contractor bids they received and to share my perspective based on my own experiences with home improvement projects. Derek asked if I would still be willing to consider co-signing their loan if they addressed my concerns about the contractor and provided more detailed financial information. I told him that I was still open to helping them, but that I needed to see evidence that they were approaching the project responsibly and had realistic plans for managing the debt. The conversation ended on a much more positive note than any of our previous discussions, and I felt hopeful that we might be able to find a solution that worked for everyone. Derek seemed genuinely interested in addressing my concerns rather than simply trying to pressure me into compliance, and I sensed that his father's intervention had helped him understand the situation from a different perspective. Wednesday morning, Rebecca called to update me on their progress with new contractor bids and to thank me for being patient with their learning process. She said that talking to other contractors had opened their eyes to some problems with their original choice and that they were grateful I'd encouraged them to do more research before committing to such a large project. Rebecca admitted that she'd been overwhelmed by all the financial details and had relied too heavily on Derek to handle everything without really understanding what they were agreeing to. She said that Derek's father had spent an evening explaining loan terms and co-signing responsibilities to both of them and that she now realized how much I would be risking by guaranteeing their debt. Rebecca asked if I would be willing to meet with them and Robert Martinez to review the new contractor bids and discuss the financial arrangements in more detail. She said that having an experienced person like Robert involved might help ensure that everyone was comfortable with the decisions being made and that no important details were overlooked. I agreed to the meeting and suggested that we also include my attorney James Morrison, so that all the legal aspects of the co-signing arrangement could be properly documented and understood by everyone involved. Rebecca sounded relieved that we were moving toward a more collaborative approach and said she felt much better about the project now that more experienced people were helping guide their decision. Thursday afternoon, we all met at Derek and Rebecca's house to review the 3 new contractor bids they'd received and to discuss the revised financial arrangement. Robert Martinez had already reviewed the bids in detail and had checked references for each contractor, including visiting recent job sites and talking to previous customers about their experience. The meeting was completely different from my previous interactions with Derek about the loan. He was respectful and attentive and seemed genuinely interested in learning from Robert's expertise and my financial concern. Rebecca had prepared detailed questions about each contractor's approach and timeline, and it was clear that she was now taking an active role in the decision-making process. James Morrison reviewed the legal documents and explained the co-signing responsibilities in terms that everyone could understand. He outlined the protections we could build into the agreement and the steps that would need to be taken if any problems arose with the loan payment. Derek asked thoughtful questions about each provision and didn't seem to resent the legal safeguards the way he had initially. By the end of the meeting, we had identified a contractor with excellent references and a detailed proposal that came in significantly under the original budget. The reduced loan amount made the monthly payments much more manageable and left room in Derek and Rebecca's budget for unexpected expenses and emergency savings. Everyone felt more confident about the project's prospects for success. Robert Martinez offered to oversee the construction process and help Derek and Rebecca manage the contractor relationship to ensure that the work stayed on schedule and within budget. James Morrison agreed to draft a co-signing agreement that protected everyone's interests while allowing the renovation to proceed on a reasonable timeline. As we wrapped up the meeting, Derek pulled me aside and said that he owed me a sincere apology for his behavior over the past few weeks. He said that he'd been so eager to get the renovation started that he'd lost sight of the importance of building trust and maintaining family relationships. He thanked me for being patient with his learning process and for insisting on standards that ultimately made the project better and safer for everyone. Rebecca hugged me as I was leaving and said that she was grateful to have a mother who cared enough to ask hard questions and protect the family's long-term interests even when it created short-term conflict. She said that the experience had taught her important lessons about financial responsibility and family communication that would serve them well in future decisions. Friday morning, Derek called to tell me that he and Rebecca had signed a contract with the recommended contractor and that they were ready to proceed with the loan application using the revised terms we'd discussed. He said that having Robert oversee the construction and James handle the legal agreements made everyone feel more secure about the project's success. Derek also mentioned that he'd been thinking about our conversation regarding Christmas dinner and said that he realized his approach to holiday planning had been unfair and hurtful. He said that he wanted to extend a proper invitation for me to join their family for Christmas and that he hoped I would consider their home a welcoming place where I was always valued and appreciated. I told Derek that I appreciated his invitation and his recognition that family relationships required mutual respect and consideration. I said that I was looking forward to spending Christmas with them and to seeing how their kitchen renovation progressed over the coming months. The conversation ended with both of us feeling optimistic about the future of our relationship and the success of their home improvement project. The week following our family meeting marked a turning point that I hadn't expected when this whole situation began unfolding back in November. Saturday morning brought crisp December air and the first real snowfall of the season, and I found myself actually looking forward to the upcoming holidays for the first time in months. Derek's genuine apology and his willingness to include me in their Christmas planning had shifted something fundamental in our relationship, though I remained cautiously optimistic about whether these changes would last. I spent Saturday morning reviewing the final contractor proposals that Robert Martinez had helped Derek and Rebecca evaluate, and I was impressed by the thoroughness of their revised approach. The contractor they'd ultimately chosen, Gary Hendricks, had been in business for 15 years and specialized in kitchen renovations with a portfolio of completed projects that demonstrated both quality workmanship and realistic timeline management. His bid came in at $135,000, significantly less than their original contractor's estimate, and included detailed specifications for materials and labor that left little room for cost overrun. Gary's proposal also included a payment schedule tied
tied to completion milestones rather than upfront deposits, which protected Derek and Rebecca from the kind of financial exposure that had concerned me about their first contract. Robert had visited 3 of Gary's recent projects and spoken with homeowners who praised his communication skills and his ability to complete work on schedule without compromising quality standards. Sunday afternoon, Derek called to update me on their progress with the bank's loan application process and to share some unexpected news about his employment situation. He said that his company had announced a restructuring plan that would actually strengthen his position and provide opportunities for advancement over the next 2 years. While there would be some layoffs in other departments, Derek's team was being expanded and he'd been offered additional responsibilities that came with a salary increase starting in January. Derek's voice carried genuine excitement as he described the new role and the financial security it would provide for his family. He said that the timing couldn't have been better since the increased income would make the loan payments even more manageable and provide additional cushion for their monthly budget. He thanked me for encouraging them to slow down and reconsider their financial planning because the delay had actually worked in their favor. Derek also mentioned that he'd been reflecting on his behavior during our initial conversations about the loan and that he realized he'd been defensive because he was anxious about asking for help. He said that admitting he needed a cosigner had felt like admitting failure as a provider and that he'd taken out his frustration on people who were trying to help him make good decisions. I told Derek that I appreciated his honesty about his feelings and that I understood how difficult it could be to ask family members for financial assistance. I said that his willingness to examine his own motivations and adjust his approach demonstrated maturity and good judgment that made me more confident about supporting their renovation project. Monday morning brought a call from James Morrison with news that the bank had approved Derek and Rebecca's loan application and was ready to proceed with the final paperwork. James had reviewed all the documentation and confirmed that the terms were fair and that the legal protections we'd requested were properly incorporated into the co-signing agreement. He said that if I was ready to move forward, we could schedule the closing for later that week. I told James that I was satisfied with the arrangements we'd negotiated and ready to sign the co-signing agreement. The process had taken longer than Derek had originally hoped, but the extra time had resulted in better terms, a more reliable contractor, and stronger financial planning that benefited everyone involved. I felt confident that we'd addressed the major risks and created a framework for success. James scheduled the loan closing for Thursday morning at his office and said that Derek, Rebecca, and I would all need to be present to sign the final document. He reminded me that once I signed the co-signing agreement, I would be legally responsible for the debt if Derek and Rebecca defaulted, but he said that based on their revised financial planning and Derek's improved employment situation, the risk seemed manageable. Tuesday afternoon, Rebecca called to invite me to dinner later that week so we could celebrate the loan approval and discuss Christmas plans in more detail. She sounded happier and more relaxed than she had in months and said that Derek was excited about finally being able to start the kitchen renovation. She also mentioned that Derek wanted to apologize in person for his behavior during our earlier conversations and to thank me properly for my patience and support. Rebecca went on to say that the whole experience had taught her important lessons about financial responsibility and family communication that she wished she'd learned earlier. She said that Derek's father, Robert, had helped both of them understand how major financial decisions affected entire families and that they were grateful to have more experienced people guiding their choices. I accepted Rebecca's dinner invitation and told her I was looking forward to spending time with their family and seeing how excited the children were about the upcoming kitchen renovation. Rebecca laughed and said that her youngest son had already started making plans for baking Christmas cookies in the new kitchen and that her daughter was excited about having space to do art projects on the large island they were planning to install. Wednesday evening, I drove to Derek and Rebecca's house for dinner and was surprised to find that they'd invited Robert Martinez and his wife Elena to join us. Robert had become something of a mentor to Derek throughout this process, and Derek clearly valued his opinion about both financial and family matters. Elena was a retired teacher who had raised 3 children and managed the family's finances while Robert built his contracting business. Derek greeted me at the door with a warm smile and a genuine apology for the stress and conflict his behavior had caused over the past month. He said that he'd learned valuable lessons about respect and communication that would serve him well in future family decisions. He thanked me for being patient with his learning process and for insisting on standards that ultimately made their renovation project safer and more successful. During dinner, Derek and Rebecca shared their excitement about the renovation timeline and the specific features they were planning to include in their new kitchen. Gary Hendricks had scheduled the work to begin the second week of January and projected completion by early March, well before any major family gatherings or celebrations. The children were thrilled about the prospect of having a larger, more functional space for family meals and homework activities. Robert Martinez spoke about his plans to oversee the construction process and ensure that the work stayed on schedule and within budget. He said that Gary Hendricks had an excellent reputation among local contractors and that he was confident the project would be completed to high standards. Robert offered to provide regular updates to me throughout the construction process so I could stay informed about the progress and any issues that might arise. Elena Martinez shared stories about her own experiences with home renovation projects and the importance of maintaining realistic expectations about timelines and costs. She said that the key to successful renovations was choosing contractors carefully and maintaining open communication throughout the process. She praised Derek and Rebecca for taking time to research their options thoroughly rather than rushing into decisions they might later regret. After dinner, Derek pulled me aside for a private conversation about our family relationship and his hopes for the future. He said that the loan situation had forced him to examine his own attitudes about money, family, and respect, and that he'd realized he'd been making decisions based on anxiety and pride rather than wisdom and consideration. Derek admitted that he'd initially excluded me from Christmas planning because he was embarrassed about needing financial help and didn't want to feel obligated to anyone. He said that asking for a cosigner had made him feel vulnerable and that he'd responded defensively when I asked reasonable questions about their financial plan. Derek went on to say that his father's guidance had helped him understand that family relationships required mutual respect and that financial assistance came with emotional responsibilities that couldn't be ignored. He said that he wanted to build a relationship with me based on genuine appreciation rather than just convenience when they needed help. I told Derek that I appreciated his honesty and his willingness to examine his own motivation. I said that family relationships were indeed built on mutual respect and that I was encouraged by his commitment to treating me as a valued family member rather than just a financial resource. I expressed my hope that our improved communication would serve as a foundation for stronger relationships going forward. Thursday morning we met at James Morrison's office for the loan closing, and I was struck by how different the atmosphere was compared to our earlier meetings about the project. Derek and Rebecca arrived early and seemed relaxed and confident about the decisions they were making. They'd prepared thoughtful questions about the loan terms and the co-signing responsibilities, and it was clear that they now understood the significance of the commitment we were all making. James reviewed each document carefully and explained the implications of every clause and provision. Derek asked specific questions about payment schedules and prepayment options, while Rebecca focused on understanding the insurance requirements and default procedures. Their questions demonstrated that they'd given serious thought to their long-term financial planning and weren't just focused on getting access to the loan proceeds. The actual signing process took about an hour, and when we finished, James congratulated us all on completing a complex financial transaction in a way that protected everyone's interest. He said that the co-signing agreement we'd developed could serve as a model for other families facing similar situations because it balanced financial protection with family relationships. After leaving James's office, Derek and Rebecca invited me to lunch at a restaurant near their house so we could celebrate the successful completion of the loan process. During lunch, Derek raised his glass and proposed a toast to family partnerships and second chance. He said that the experience had taught him valuable lessons about communication and respect that would make him a better husband, father, and son-in-law. Rebecca added that she was grateful to have a mother who cared enough to ask hard questions and protect the family's interests even when it created temporary conflict. She said that the process had strengthened their family relationships and given her confidence that they could handle future challenges together. Friday morning, Derek called to tell me that Gary Hendricks had scheduled the kitchen demolition to begin on January 8th. And that they were finalizing the material orders and delivery schedule. Derek sounded genuinely excited about the project and grateful that we'd taken time to find the right contractor and develop a solid financial plan. Derek also mentioned that he'd been thinking about our Christmas dinner conversation and wanted to make sure I felt genuinely welcome and valued as part of their holiday celebration. He said that he'd learned the difference between grudging inclusion and enthusiastic welcome and that he wanted to demonstrate the latter when I joined them for Christmas. I told Derek that I was looking forward to spending Christmas with their family and appreciated his efforts to make me feel valued and included. I said that the experience of working through the loan situation together had given me confidence that we could handle future challenges and disagreements in a constructive way. The weekend before Christmas brought an unexpected snowstorm that blanketed Cedar Falls in 8 inches of fresh snow and created a winter wonderland that reminded me of Christmases from my childhood. Saturday morning, Derek called to check whether the storm had affected my plans to drive to Minneapolis for Christmas dinner and to offer to pick me up if I was concerned about driving in the snow. I told Derek that I was comfortable driving in winter weather but appreciated his offer and his concern for my safety.
The fact that he'd thought to check on me and offer assistance felt like genuine family consideration rather than polite obligation, and it reinforced my growing confidence that our relationship had fundamentally improved. Derek went on to describe the Christmas preparations at their house and how excited the children were about having their grandmother join them for the holiday. He said that Rebecca had been cooking for days and that they'd set up the dining room to accommodate the entire extended family, including me, Derek's parents, and his sister's family. Sunday afternoon, Rebecca called to finalize the Christmas dinner menu and to ask if I had any special dietary requirements or preferences they should accommodate. She sounded genuinely excited about the celebration and mentioned that Derek had insisted on including several of my favorite dishes in the meal planning. The attention to my preferences felt like a significant change from Derek's previous attitude about family gatherings. Rebecca also asked if I would be willing to bring my famous apple pie that the grandchildren had been requesting for months. She said that Derek had specifically asked her to invite me to contribute to the meal because he wanted me to feel like an integral part of the celebration rather than just a guest. The request felt like genuine inclusion, and I was happy to agree. Monday evening, I spent several hours preparing my apple pie recipe and thinking about how much had changed since that first devastating phone call in November when Rebecca had told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. The journey from exclusion to genuine inclusion had been difficult and sometimes painful, but it had ultimately strengthened our family relationships in ways I hadn't expected. Tuesday morning brought a surprise visit from Derek, who stopped by on his way to work to personally invite me to Christmas dinner and to express his gratitude for my patience and support throughout the loan process. He said that he wanted to deliver the invitation face to face because he realized that his previous approach to family communication had been inadequate and hurtful. Derek spent 20 minutes sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and talking about his hopes for the upcoming year and his commitment to maintaining the improved family relationships we'd developed. He said that the experience of working through the loan situation had taught him valuable lessons about respect, communication, and family loyalty that he planned to apply to all his future interactions. Derek also mentioned that his parents were looking forward to spending time with me during the Christmas celebration, and that they'd expressed their appreciation for the way I'd handled the difficult situation with their son. He said that his father, Robert, had told him repeatedly that I'd demonstrated wisdom and patience that had ultimately benefited everyone involved. Christmas Eve arrived with clear skies and moderate temperatures that made the drive to Minneapolis pleasant and relaxing. I loaded my car with the apple pie-wrapped presents for the grandchildren and a bottle of wine for Derek and Rebecca, and set out with genuine anticipation for the holiday celebration ahead. When I arrived at Derek and Rebecca's house, I was greeted with enthusiastic hugs from the grandchildren and warm welcomes from Derek's entire family. Derek's mother, Patricia, made a point of thanking me for my patience with Derek's learning process and for helping guide their family toward better financial decisions. Derek's father, Robert, praised my wisdom and said that the renovation project was going to be much more successful because of my insistence on thorough planning. Derek himself seemed genuinely happy to see me and went out of his way to make sure I felt included in every conversation and activity. He introduced me to his college friend Mark as an important member of the family and made sure I had comfortable seating and easy access to food and drinks throughout the evening. Christmas morning brought the joy of watching the grandchildren open their presents and the satisfaction of sharing a meal that everyone had contributed to creating. Derek made a point of thanking me publicly for the apple pie and for my contributions to their family's success and happiness over the past year. During dinner, Derek stood up and offered a toast that acknowledged my role in in helping them navigate the loan process and thanked me for being patient with his mistakes and committed to their family's long-term well-being. He said that the experience had taught him important lessons about family relationships and financial responsibility that would guide his decisions for years to come. The day concluded with all of us sitting around the living room sharing stories and planning for the upcoming kitchen renovation. Derek and Rebecca showed everyone the contractor's plans and timeline, and the grandchildren excitedly discussed all the baking and cooking projects they wanted to tackle in the new space. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically the situation had changed since November, and a combination of firm boundaries, clear communication, and mutual respect had transformed what could have been a permanent family rift into an opportunity for stronger relationships and better understanding. The experience had taught me that standing up for myself and insisting on fair treatment didn't damage family relationships but actually strengthened them by creating foundations of mutual respect and honest communication. Derek had learned that asking for help required treating helpers with consideration and gratitude, while I had learned that sometimes conflict is necessary to reach better understanding. The week between Christmas and New Year brought regular phone calls from Derek with updates about the renovation preparations and expressions of gratitude for my support throughout the process. Gary Hendricks had finalized the material orders and confirmed the January 8th start date, and Derek was excited about finally seeing their kitchen dreams become reality. Derek also used these conversations to continue building our improved relationship by asking for my advice about family decisions and sharing his thoughts about future goals and plans. The change from his previous dismissive attitude was remarkable, and it demonstrated that people could learn and grow when given appropriate incentives and expectations. New Year's Eve brought an unexpected invitation to join Derek and Rebecca for a quiet celebration at their house with just immediate family members. Derek said that he wanted to start the new year by acknowledging the people who had been most important to their family's success and happiness, and that I was definitely included in that group. The evening was relaxed and enjoyable, with good food, meaningful conversation, and genuine appreciation for the journey we'd all taken together over the past few months. Derek and Rebecca talked about their hopes for the coming year and their gratitude for the lessons they'd learned about family communication and financial responsibility. As midnight approached, Derek raised his glass and proposed a toast to new beginnings and stronger family relationships. He said that the past year had taught him valuable lessons about respect, gratitude, and the importance of treating family members with the consideration they deserved regardless of financial circumstance. I went to bed that night feeling optimistic about the future and confident that the difficult experiences of the past few months had ultimately strengthened our family bonds and created foundations for better relationships going forward. The kitchen renovation would begin in just over a week, and I was looking forward to watching Derek and Rebecca's dreams become reality, while knowing that I had helped guide them toward wise decisions that would serve their family well for years to come. The first week of January brought final preparations for the kitchen renovation and regular communication between Derek, Rebecca, and me about timeline, logistics, and expectations. Gary Hendricks met with Derek and Robert Martinez to review the work schedule and confirm that all materials would be delivered on time and that the house would be properly prepared for the construction process. Derek called me several times during the week to update me on the preparations and to express his continued gratitude for my support throughout the loan process. He seemed genuinely excited about the renovation and confident that the project would proceed smoothly under Robert's oversight and Gary's experienced management. Rebecca also called to thank me again for my patience during the difficult negotiations and to say that she felt much more confident about their financial future, knowing that they'd made careful, well-researched decisions with guidance from experienced family members. She said that the experience had taught her important lessons about taking active roles in major financial decisions rather than leaving everything to Derek. January 7th arrived with anticipation and nervous energy as Derek and Rebecca prepared their house for the renovation to begin the following morning. They'd moved most of their belongings out of the kitchen and set up a temporary cooking area in their basement family room that would serve them during the 3 months of construction. That evening, Derek called to thank me one final time before the renovation began and to say that he hoped I would visit regularly during the construction process to see the progress and offer any suggestions or observations. He said that my involvement in the project planning had been invaluable and that he wanted me to continue feeling like an integral part of the process. I told Derek that I was looking forward to seeing their kitchen dreams become reality and that I was proud of the mature, responsible approach they'd ultimately taken to this major financial commitment. I said that the experience had strengthened our family relationships and given me confidence that we could work together successfully on future challenges and opportunities. As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over the past 2 months and how firm boundaries and clear communication had turned a potentially damaging situation into an opportunity for growth and better understanding. The kitchen renovation would begin the next morning, and I was confident that it would be successful both as a home improvement project and as a demonstration of what families could accomplish when they treated each other with respect, consideration, and honest communication. The morning of January 8th dawned cold and clear, with temperatures hovering near 15 degrees and a sharp wind that rattled the windows of my house in Cedar Falls. I woke up earlier than usual, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the kitchen renovation that would begin at Derek and Rebecca's house later that morning. After months of planning, negotiating, and soul-searching, we were finally at the moment when their dreams would start becoming reality. I decided to drive to Minneapolis around 10 o'clock to see the demolition work begin and to meet Gary Hendricks in person for the first time. Derek had invited me to be there for the start of construction, and I appreciated being included in what felt like a milestone moment for their family. The drive gave me time to reflect on how much had changed since that first devastating phone call in November when I'd learned I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner. When I arrived at Derek and Rebecca's house, I found controlled chaos, with Gary's crew unloading tools and equipment while Derek and Robert Martinez discussed the day's work plan and timeline. Gary struck me immediately as a professional who took pride in his work and respected his client's home. He introduced himself warmly and thanked me for helping Derek and Rebecca make good decisions about their renovation project. Gary walked me through the demolition plan, explaining how his crew would carefully remove the old cabinets and appliances while protecting the rest of the house from dust and debris. He pointed out structural elements that would remain unchanged and showed me where new electrical and plumbing lines would be installed to support the upgraded kitchen layout. His attention to detail and clear communication impressed me and reinforced my confidence in Derek and Rebecca's contractor choice. Derek seemed genuinely excited as he watched the demolition begin, and he made a point of keeping me informed about each step of the process. He explained how different areas of the kitchen would be transformed and how the new layout would improve functionality for their family's daily routines. His enthusiasm was infectious, and it was clear that this renovation represented much more than just a home improvement project for him. Rebecca arrived home from her dental office job during lunch break to check on the progress, and she was thrilled to see the old kitchen finally being dismantled. She thanked me repeatedly for making the renovation possible and said that watching the work begin felt like Christmas morning all over again. Her genuine appreciation meant more to me than any financial return could have provided. The first week of construction proceeded smoothly, with Gary's crew completing the demolition phase ahead of schedule and beginning the rough electrical and plumbing work. Derek called me every evening to provide progress updates and to share his excitement about seeing the project take shape. His regular communication felt like genuine family connection rather than obligation, and it demonstrated his commitment to keeping me involved throughout the process. Robert Martinez also provided weekly reports about the construction quality and timeline, confirming that Gary was meeting all the standards they discussed during the planning phase. Robert's oversight gave everyone additional confidence that the project would be completed on time and within budget without compromising workmanship quality. Friday afternoon of the first week brought an unexpected challenge when Gary discovered some outdated wiring behind the kitchen walls that needed to be upgraded to meet current electrical code. The additional work would add about $3,000 to the project cost and delay completion by approximately 1 week, but Gary emphasized that the upgrades were necessary for safety and would prevent potential problems in the future. Derek called me immediately when he learned about the electrical issue, and I could hear the stress in his voice as he explained the additional costs and timeline implications. He said that he and Rebecca had sufficient savings to cover the extra expense, but that he wanted to keep me informed since I was guaranteeing the loan and had a financial stake in the project's success. I told Derek that unexpected discoveries were common in renovation projects, especially in older homes, and that addressing electrical safety issues was always the right choice regardless of cost or timing implications.
I said that Gary's transparency about the problem and his clear explanation of the solution demonstrated the professionalism that had influenced our decision to hire him. Derek sounded relieved that I supported his decision to authorize the additional electrical work, and he thanked me for being understanding about the complication. He said that Rebecca was initially upset about the delay, but that she agreed safety should be the top priority and that a few extra weeks wouldn't significantly impact their long-term enjoyment of the new kitchen. The second week of construction focused on completing the electrical upgrades and installing new plumbing lines for the kitchen island and upgraded appliances. Gary's electrician worked carefully to minimize disruption to other areas of the house while ensuring that all wiring met current safety standards. The additional work proceeded efficiently, and Derek reported that the crew maintained excellent communication about daily progress and any issues that arose. Wednesday of the second week, Derek invited me to visit the construction site to see the progress and to meet with Gary about selecting final finishes and fixtures. When I arrived, I was impressed by how organized and clean the work area remained despite the complexity of the electrical and plumbing installations. Gary's crew clearly took pride in maintaining professional standards throughout the construction process. Gary showed me the new electrical panel and explained how the upgraded wiring would support modern appliances and provide additional outlets for small kitchen electronics. He also demonstrated how the new plumbing layout would improve water pressure and provide better access for future maintenance. His technical explanations helped me understand why the additional costs were justified and necessary. Derek and Rebecca had prepared a list of questions about fixture selections and finish options, and Gary patiently reviewed each choice, explaining the pros and cons of different materials and brands. His willingness to educate his clients rather than simply pushing expensive options impressed me and reinforced my confidence that they'd chosen the right contractor for their project. During our meeting, Gary mentioned that he'd worked on several similar projects in Derek and Rebecca's neighborhood, and that kitchen renovations typically increased home values by 15 to 20% when completed with quality materials and professional installation. This information provided additional reassurance that their investment would benefit their family's long-term financial position. The third week brought the installation of new subflooring and the beginning of cabinet construction in Gary's workshop. Derek arranged for me to visit Gary's facility to see the custom cabinets being built and to understand the quality of materials and craftsmanship that would go into their kitchen. The workshop visit exceeded my expectations and demonstrated Gary's commitment to delivering superior results. Gary's cabinet maker explained the construction techniques and hardware selections that would ensure durability and functionality for years of family use. He showed me samples of the wood stain and finish that Derek and Rebecca had chosen and demonstrated how the soft close hinges and drawer slides would operate. The attention to detail and quality of materials justified the investment and supported Derek and Rebecca's decision to prioritize long-term value over short-term saving. Rebecca joined us for the workshop visit, and she was amazed by the craftsmanship and care that went into creating their custom cabinet. She asked thoughtful questions about maintenance requirements and warranty coverage, and Gary provided detailed information about protecting their investment over time. Her engagement in these technical discussions showed how much she'd grown in understanding and appreciating the renovation process. The fourth week focused on installing new drywall and beginning the cabinet installation process. Gary's crew worked methodically to ensure precise measurements and proper alignment for each cabinet section. Derek visited the worksite daily and provided regular updates about the progress and quality of the installation work. Friday of the fourth week brought an exciting milestone when the first section of base cabinets was installed and Derek could finally visualize how the completed kitchen would look and function. He called me that evening with genuine excitement in his voice as he described seeing their design plans become three-dimensional reality. His enthusiasm reminded me why supporting their renovation had been worth the challenges we'd worked through together. The fifth week brought the installation of countertops and the beginning of appliance deliveries. Derek and Rebecca had chosen quartz countertops that would provide durability and easy maintenance for their busy family lifestyle. The installation process required precise measurements and careful handling, but Gary's crew managed the complex logistics smoothly and professionally. Wednesday of the fifth week brought the delivery of Derek and Rebecca's new appliances, including a professional-grade range that Derek had dreamed about for years. Watching him examine each feature and imagine cooking elaborate family meals brought home how much this renovation meant to him personally and professionally as the family provider he wanted to be. Rebecca took vacation time from her dental office job to be present for the appliance installations and to begin planning the kitchen organization and storage solution. She spent hours with Gary discussing optimal placement for dishes, cookware, and pantry items to maximize the functionality of their new space. Her detailed planning demonstrated her commitment to making the most of their investment. The sixth week focused on completing the backsplash installation and final electrical connections for all appliances and lighting fixtures. Derek and Rebecca had chosen a subway tile backsplash with dark grout that provided classic elegance while hiding everyday cooking stain. The installation required careful attention to alignment and spacing, but Gary's tile installer delivered excellent results. Friday of the sixth week brought the completion of painting and the installation of cabinet hardware, including brushed nickel handles and knobs that complemented the overall design aesthetic. Derek called me that evening to report that the kitchen was nearly complete and that Gary expected to finish all remaining work by the middle of the following week. The seventh week brought final inspections and touch-up work as Gary completed the last details of the renovation project. The electrical inspector approved all the upgraded wiring and the plumbing inspector confirmed that all connections met current codes and standards. These official approvals provided final confirmation that the renovation had been completed to professional standards. Tuesday of the seventh week, Derek called to invite me for a preview of the completed kitchen before the final walkthrough with Gary. His voice carried genuine pride and excitement as he described the transformation and thanked me again for making the renovation possible through my loan guarantee and supportive guidance throughout the process. When I arrived at Derek and Rebecca's house the following afternoon, I was amazed by the complete transformation of their kitchen space. The new layout provided significantly more counter space and storage while creating an open flow that connected the kitchen to their dining and family area. The quality of materials and craftsmanship exceeded my expectations and justified every dollar of their investment. Derek and Rebecca gave me a detailed tour of each feature, explaining how different elements would improve their daily routines and family activity. The large island provided seating for casual meals and homework activities, while the new appliances offered capabilities they'd never had before. Their excitement and gratitude were evident in every word and gesture. Rebecca demonstrated the soft close cabinet doors and drawers, explaining how much quieter the kitchen would be during early morning and late evening meal preparation. She showed me the pull-out storage solutions that would keep dishes and cookware organized and easily accessible. Her attention to practical details showed how thoroughly she'd planned for their family's needs. Derek highlighted the professional-grade range and hood system that would allow him to pursue his interest in more ambitious cooking projects. He explained how the improved ventilation and additional counter space would make it possible to prepare elaborate holiday meals without feeling cramped or overwhelmed. His vision for family gatherings and celebrations in the new space was inspiring. The completed renovation represented more than just a home improvement project. It symbolized Derek and Rebecca's growth as partners in major family decisions and their commitment to building a welcoming space for extended family relationships. The kitchen would serve as the heart of their home for years to come, and I felt honored to have played a role in making their dreams reality. Thursday brought the final walkthrough with Gary and the official completion of the renovation project. Gary reviewed every element of the work with Derek and Rebecca, explaining warranty coverage and maintenance requirements for different materials and systems. His thoroughness and professionalism provided confidence that any future issues would be addressed promptly and fairly. Gary also provided detailed documentation, including photos of hidden electrical and plumbing installations that would be valuable for future maintenance or modifications. His attention to these details demonstrated his commitment to long-term client satisfaction rather than just project completion. Derek and Rebecca expressed their appreciation for Gary's work and recommended him enthusiastically to neighbors and friends. Friday afternoon, Derek and Rebecca hosted a small celebration dinner in their completed kitchen with their children Robert and Elena Martinez and me as special guests. The dinner provided an opportunity to see how the new space functioned for actual meal preparation and family gathering. Every element worked exactly as planned, and the kitchen felt both elegant and comfortable for everyday use. During dinner, Derek stood up and offered a toast, acknowledging everyone who had contributed to the success of their renovation project.
He specifically thanked me for providing financial support and wise guidance throughout the planning and construction process. He said that my insistence on thorough research and careful decision-making had resulted in better outcomes than they could have achieved on their own. Rebecca added her own thanks for my patience during the difficult early negotiations and for helping them understand the importance of detailed financial planning. She said that the experience had taught her valuable lessons about taking active roles in major family decisions and communicating effectively about money and priorities. Robert Martinez praised Derek's growth throughout the renovation process and his willingness to learn from more experienced family members. He said that Derek had demonstrated maturity and good judgment in managing the construction process and working effectively with contractors and suppliers. Robert's approval meant a great deal to Derek and provided validation for his efforts to become a better family leader. The evening concluded with all of us sitting around the new kitchen island, sharing stories and making plans for future family gatherings. The children were already planning elaborate baking projects and holiday meal preparations. Their excitement about having a beautiful functional space for family activities made all the challenges worthwhile. Saturday morning, Derek called to provide the final financial report on the renovation project, confirming that the total cost, including the electrical upgrades, had come in slightly under their revised budget. Gary's accurate estimates and careful cost management had prevented the kind of overruns that plague many renovation projects. Derek expressed his gratitude for my guidance in selecting a reliable contractor who delivered exactly what he promised. Derek also reported that he'd made the first loan payment ahead of schedule, and that his increased salary from his promotion would make future payments easily manageable within their monthly budget. The financial planning we'd insisted on during the loan application process had proven its value by ensuring that the renovation enhanced rather than strained their overall financial position. The following week brought visits from several neighbors and friends who wanted to see the completed renovation and learn about Derek and Rebecca's experience with Gary Hendrick. Their enthusiasm for sharing information about their positive contractor experience demonstrated their satisfaction with both the process and the results. Word-of-mouth recommendations are the highest compliment any contractor can receive. Rebecca returned to her normal work schedule at the dental office, but called me regularly to share her daily experiences with the new kitchen and to express her continued gratitude for making the renovation possible. She described how much easier meal preparation had become, and how the improved layout made it possible to involve the children in cooking activities that had been difficult in their cramped old space. Derek also maintained regular contact, providing updates about his new responsibilities at work and his ongoing appreciation for the kitchen renovation. He said that cooking had become a genuine pleasure rather than a chore, and that he looked forward to hosting extended family gatherings in their beautiful new space. His transformation from anxious defensive borrower to confident grateful family member had been remarkable to witness. 3 weeks after the renovation completion, Derek and Rebecca hosted their first major family gathering in the new kitchen for Rebecca's birthday celebration. They invited both sides of the extended family, including Derek's parents and siblings, and several close friends. The party provided a perfect test of the kitchen's capacity and functionality for entertaining. I arrived early to help with meal preparation and was amazed by how efficiently the new kitchen handled the complex logistics of cooking for 20 people. The additional counter space and storage made it possible to prepare multiple dishes simultaneously without feeling crowded or disorganized. The improved ventilation system managed cooking odors and steam effectively, even with the range and oven operating at full capacity. Derek took obvious pride in demonstrating the kitchen's features to family members and friends, explaining how different elements contributed to the overall functionality and aesthetic. His confidence and enthusiasm showed how much personal satisfaction he derived from providing his family with a beautiful, comfortable space for daily activities and special celebrations. Rebecca managed the party preparations with remarkable calm and efficiency thanks to the improved organization and workflow of the new kitchen. She was able to focus on enjoying time with family and friends, rather than struggling with inadequate space and storage. Her relaxed demeanor demonstrated how much stress the renovation had eliminated from her daily routines. The birthday celebration was a complete success, with guests praising both the food and the beautiful setting. Derek and Rebecca had created. Several neighbors asked for Gary Hendricks' contact information and requested advice about planning their own kitchen renovations. Derek and Rebecca were happy to share their positive experience and recommended the thorough planning process we'd follow. During the party, Derek's father, Robert Martinez, pulled me aside to express his appreciation for the wisdom and patience I'd shown throughout the entire process. He said that Derek had learned valuable lessons about family relationships and financial responsibility that would serve him well throughout his life. Robert's praise meant a great deal coming from someone whose judgment I respected highly. As the evening wound down, Derek and Rebecca both thanked me again for making their kitchen dreams possible and for helping them navigate the complex decisions involved in such a major project. They said that the renovation had exceeded their expectations in every way and that they looked forward to creating many happy memories in their beautiful new space. The weeks following the birthday party brought a steady stream of positive feedback from family members and friends who had experienced Derek and Rebecca's new kitchen. Several people commented on how the renovation had transformed not just their physical space but also their confidence as hosts and their enjoyment of daily family activity. Derek's transformation from the defensive, anxious man who had initially excluded me from Christmas dinner to a grateful, confident family leader who regularly sought my advice and included me in important decisions was remarkable. The experience had taught him valuable lessons about respect, communication, and the mutual obligations that come with family relationships. Rebecca's growth in understanding financial responsibility and her increased confidence in participating actively in major family decisions had strengthened her marriage and improved her ability to advocate for her family's needs. She no longer deferred automatically to Derek's judgment, but engaged thoughtfully in discussions about important choices. The success of Derek and Rebecca's kitchen renovation became a source of inspiration for other family members and friends who were considering their own home improvement projects. Several people sought my advice about financial planning and contractor selection based on the positive outcomes we'd achieved through careful research and thorough preparation. Most importantly, the experience had strengthened our family relationships by establishing clear expectations for mutual respect and consideration. Derek had learned that asking for financial help required treating helpers with genuine appreciation, while I had learned that standing firm on reasonable boundaries could lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. The kitchen renovation was completed exactly as planned, within budget and on the revised timeline despite the unexpected electrical complications. Gary Hendricks had delivered exceptional results that would serve Derek and Rebecca's family well for decades to come. The quality of materials and workmanship justified every dollar of their investment and provided confidence that they'd made wise long-term decisions. As spring arrived and the renovation became part of Derek and Rebecca's daily routine, I reflected on how much we'd all learned from this challenging experience. What had begun as a painful conflict over holiday exclusion and financial manipulation had ultimately become an opportunity for growth, understanding, and stronger family bonds built on foundations of mutual respect and honest communication. 6 months after the kitchen renovation was completed, I received a phone call that would test everything Derek and I had learned about family relationships and mutual respect. It was a Tuesday morning in late August, and I was tending to my garden when Derek called with news that his company was offering him a promotion that would require relocating to Denver, Colorado within the next 3 months. Derek's voice carried a mixture of excitement and uncertainty as he explained the opportunity and its implications for his career advancement. The position would involve managing a regional office and represented a significant step forward in his professional development, with a substantial salary increase that would secure his family's financial future. However, the timing and logistics of the move presented complex challenges that would affect our entire family. Derek said that he and Rebecca had been discussing the opportunity for several days, but wanted to include me in their decision-making process because of my ongoing involvement in their financial planning and my role as an important family member. His willingness to seek my input on such a major decision demonstrated how much our relationship had evolved since the difficult early days of the loan negotiation. I told Derek that I appreciated being included in their discussions and asked him to explain the specific details of the job offer and the timeline for making a decision. He described the responsibilities of the new position and the career growth potential it represented while acknowledging the challenges of moving away from established family and community connections in Minneapolis. Derek went on to explain that the promotion would increase his salary by 40% and provide opportunities for further advancement that weren't available in his current position. The financial benefits would allow them to pay off their kitchen renovation loan ahead of schedule and build substantial savings for the children's education and their own retirement plan. However, Derek also expressed concerns about leaving behind the support system they'd built in Minneapolis, including Rebecca's job at the dental office, the children's schools and activities, and the extended family relationships that had become more important to them over the past year. He said that Rebecca was torn between supporting his career advancement and maintaining the stability their family had worked hard to establish. I asked Derek what Rebecca's thoughts were about the potential move and whether she'd been able to research job opportunities in Denver's dental field. He said that Rebecca was cautiously optimistic about the career change but worried about starting over in a new city without established professional and personal connection. Derek mentioned that they'd researched housing costs in Denver and found that their increased income would allow them to afford a larger home in a good school district, but that real estate prices were significantly higher than in Minneapolis. They were confident they could manage the financial aspects of the move but concerned about the emotional and practical challenges of relocating. I told Derek that career opportunities like this one didn't come along often and that he should carefully consider the long-term benefits for his family's financial security and professional satisfaction. I also suggested that they visit Denver to explore neighborhoods and get a better sense of what their new life might look like before making a final decision. Derek said they'd already planned a weekend trip to Denver to look at houses and neighborhoods and that the company was providing relocation assistance, including help with selling their current home and covering moving expenses. The support package made the transition more feasible but didn't eliminate the emotional difficulty of leaving behind established relationships and routines. 2 weeks later, Derek and Rebecca called me from Denver, where they were spending a long weekend exploring potential neighborhoods and getting familiar with the city. They sounded excited about what they'd discovered and said that Denver offered outdoor recreation opportunities and cultural amenities that would enhance their family's quality of life in addition to Derek's career prospects. Rebecca had interviewed with 2 dental practices and received encouraging responses about potential job opportunities that would allow her to continue developing her professional skills while contributing to their family's income. The prospect of maintaining her career momentum had been an important factor in her willingness to consider the move. Derek described the neighborhoods they'd visited and the houses they'd toured, saying that they'd found several options that would provide more space for their family while maintaining reasonable commute times to his new office. The children would have access to excellent schools and recreational programs that weren't available in their current location. They also mentioned that Denver's proximity to mountains and outdoor recreation areas would provide opportunities for family activities and adventures that had always appealed to them but weren't practical from Minneapolis. The lifestyle changes associated with the move were beginning to seem like advantages rather than just challenges to overcome. When they returned from Denver, Derek and Rebecca invited me to dinner to discuss their decision and to seek my advice about the financial and family implications of accepting the promotion. Their willingness to include me in such an important family discussion reinforced the trust and respect that had developed between us over the past year. During dinner, Derek and Rebecca shared detailed information about the job offer, the relocation package, and their impressions of Denver as a place to raise their family. They'd prepared a thorough analysis of the financial benefits and challenges and had given serious consideration to the impact on their children's education and social development. Derek explained that accepting the promotion would allow them to pay off their kitchen renovation loan within 2 years instead of the original 5-year timeline and would provide financial security that would benefit their family for decades to come. The salary increase would also make it possible to contribute significantly more to the children's college funds and their own retirement savings. Rebecca described her conversations with Denver dental practices and her confidence that she could establish a successful career in their new city. She'd been impressed by the professional opportunities available and excited about the possibility of working with new colleagues and learning new techniques and technology. They also discussed their concerns about leaving behind family and friends, particularly the support system that had been so important during Derek's recent growth and maturation. Rebecca worried about maintaining close relationships with extended family members, and Derek was concerned about losing the mentorship and guidance he'd received from his father throughout the kitchen renovation process. I told Derek and Rebecca that while I would miss having them nearby, I thought the promotion represented an exceptional opportunity that could transform their family's future in positive ways. I said that maintaining strong family relationships didn't require geographic proximity and that we could find ways to stay connected despite the distance. Derek asked specifically about the loan co-signing arrangement and whether my obligations would change if they moved to Colorado. I explained that the legal responsibilities would remain the same regardless of their location, but that I had complete confidence in their commitment to meeting their financial obligations based on their demonstrated responsibility over the past year. Rebecca expressed concern about losing the regular family support and advice that had been so valuable during their recent challenges and growth. I assured her that distance wouldn't diminish my interest in their family's well-being and that modern communication technology would make it easy to maintain close contact and continue providing guidance when needed. After dinner, Derek and Rebecca told me they'd decided to accept the promotion and begin preparing for the move to Denver. They planned to put their house on the market within the next few weeks and hoped to complete the relocation before the children started the new school year in their new city. Derek thanked me again for the role I'd played in their financial planning and family development, saying that the lessons he'd learned about respect, communication, and responsibility would serve him well in his new leadership position. He said that the confidence he'd gained from successfully managing the kitchen renovation and loan process had prepared him for the challenges of his new job. Rebecca expressed gratitude for my patience during their learning process and said that the experience of working through difficult family issues had strengthened their marriage and improved their ability to handle major life changes together. She credited our family discussions with teaching her important lessons about financial planning and decision-making that would benefit them throughout their lives. The weeks following their decision brought intensive preparation for the move, including house showings, real estate negotiations, and the complex logistics of relocating a family across multiple states. Derek and Rebecca approached these challenges with the same careful planning and open communication that had characterized their approach to the kitchen renovation. Their house sold within 3 weeks of being listed, confirming that the kitchen renovation had indeed increased the property's value and marketability as Gary Hendricks had predicted. The sale price exceeded their expectations and provided additional funds for their relocation and establishment in Denver. Derek kept me informed throughout the selling and moving process and continued to seek my advice about financial decisions related to their relocation. His ongoing communication demonstrated his commitment to maintaining our improved family relationship despite the geographic distance that would soon separate us. 2 weeks before their scheduled move, Derek and Rebecca hosted a farewell dinner for extended family and close friends in their beautiful kitchen one last time. The gathering provided an opportunity to celebrate their success and express appreciation for the support they'd received during their growth and development as a family. During the dinner, Derek offered a final toast acknowledging the role that our kitchen renovation experience had played in preparing him for his new career opportunity. He said that the lessons he'd learned about planning, communication, and respect had given him confidence to accept challenges that would have seemed overwhelming just a year earlier. Rebecca added that the experience had taught her important lessons about taking active roles in major family decisions and trusting her own judgment about what was best for their family. She said that the confidence she'd gained would serve her well as they established themselves in a new city and built new professional and personal relationships. The farewell dinner was both celebratory and bittersweet, as we all recognized that this chapter of our family story was ending while a new one was beginning. The kitchen renovation had brought us together and taught us valuable lessons about family relationships that would continue to benefit us regardless of distance. Moving day arrived with unseasonably cool weather and the organized chaos of professional movers loading Derek and Rebecca's belongings for the journey to Denver.
I arrived early to help with last-minute preparations and to spend a few final hours in the kitchen that had brought our family so much joy and growth over the past year. Derek and Rebecca both expressed mixed emotions about leaving behind their beautiful kitchen so soon after its completion, but acknowledged that the renovation had served its purpose by providing a comfortable space for family activities and increasing their home's value for resale. They were excited about the opportunity to design another kitchen in their new Denver home. As the moving truck pulled away, Derek and Rebecca and the children climbed into their car for the drive to their new life in Colorado. Derek promised to call when they arrived safely and to stay in regular contact as they settled into their new community. Rebecca hugged me tearfully and thanked me once more for being such an important part of their family's journey. 3 days later, Derek called to report that they'd arrived safely in Denver and that the moving process had gone smoothly. Their new house was larger than their Minneapolis home and had a kitchen that would eventually need renovation but was functional for their immediate needs. The children were excited about exploring their new neighborhood and preparing for the school year ahead. Over the following months, Derek and Rebecca sent regular updates about their adjustment to life in Denver, including photos of family activities and descriptions of their new routines and friendship. Derek's new job was challenging but rewarding, and Rebecca had found a position with a dental practice that offered opportunities for professional growth and development. 6 months after their move, Derek called with exciting news that his performance in the Denver position had been so successful that his company was already considering him for additional promotions that could lead to even greater career advancement. The confidence and leadership skills he'd developed during our kitchen renovation experience were serving him well in his new role. Rebecca reported that she loved her new job and had quickly established herself as a valuable team member at her dental practice. The children had adapted well to their new schools and had made friends through sports and other activities. Their family was thriving in ways that exceeded their expectations when they'd first considered the move. Derek also mentioned that they'd been saving aggressively and were ahead of schedule on paying off their kitchen renovation loan. The increased income from his promotion combined with their reduced living expenses in some areas had created financial flexibility that allowed them to accelerate their debt repayment and increase their savings. A year after their move to Denver, Derek and Rebecca invited me to visit their new home and see how they'd settled into their new life. The trip provided an opportunity to reconnect in person and to see firsthand how well they'd adapted to their new environment and continued to apply the lessons they'd learned about family communication and financial responsibility. Their new house was indeed larger and more luxurious than their Minneapolis home, and they'd begun planning renovations that would update the kitchen and other areas to better suit their family's needs and preferences. Derek asked for my advice about contractors and financial planning for their new projects, demonstrating that our relationship had evolved into a lasting partnership based on mutual respect and trust. During my visit, Derek and Rebecca reflected on how much their lives had changed since that difficult November when Derek had excluded me from Christmas dinner while asking for loan co-signing help. They both acknowledged that the conflicts and challenges of that period had ultimately strengthened their family relationships and taught them valuable lessons about respect, communication, and mutual support. Derek said that the experience had transformed his understanding of what it meant to be a family leader and had taught him that true leadership required listening to others and treating everyone with consideration and respect. Rebecca added that she'd learned to take more active roles in important family decisions and to trust her own judgment about what was best for their family's future. As I prepared to return to Cedar Falls, Derek and Rebecca both expressed their gratitude for the patience and wisdom I'd shown during their difficult learning process. They said that my willingness to stand firm on important principles while remaining open to positive change had been instrumental in their growth and development as individuals and as a family. The experience with Derek and Rebecca's kitchen renovation and subsequent relocation had taught me important lessons about the value of maintaining clear boundaries while remaining flexible enough to allow relationships to evolve and improve. Standing up for myself when Derek initially excluded me from Christmas had ultimately led to stronger family bonds and more honest communication. Looking back on the entire experience from that first hurtful phone call through Derek's successful career advancement, I realized that sometimes the most difficult family conflicts can become opportunities for growth and understanding when approached with patience, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to mutual respect and consideration. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.